evening, it's Monday the 21st of April and here's what's making news around the world on World News Tonight. Legacy ends. Pope Francis, Latin America's first pontiff, passed away, aged 88. Diplomatic progress. US and Iran advance nuclear talks with new rounds in Europe. Metal marathon. Humanoid robots stumbled through Beijing's first human robot race, right here on World News Tonight.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Aquil Qureshi.
Good evening once again. Tonight we mark the end of an era in the Roman Catholic Church. Pope Francis, the first Latin American pontiff and one of the most transformative leaders in the Church's modern history, has passed away.
The white smoke spiraling from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel made Jorge Maria Bergoglio the first non-European pope in 1300 years. Born in Argentina in 1936 to Italian immigrant parents, he grew up in a modest family in Buenos Aires. During his studies, Jorge Bergoglio worked as a janitor and a nightclub bouncer, an unusual profile, but one that didn't prevent him from climbing the ladder within the church. He was appointed bishop, then archbishop, before being appointed as Cardinal of Buenos Aires in 2001. Nicknamed Prince of the Poor, he made clear he wouldn't live in the Vatican like his predecessors, instead choosing to reside at St. Martha's Guest House with other clergy members.
I was wondering, why did you give up all the wealth of a pope?
I have a need to live among the people.
For his first visit outside Rome, the pontiff chose the Italian island of Lampedusa, where thousands of migrants died attempting to reach its shores. Whilst it was a change in message, it wasn't a change in doctrine, as the Vatican reaffirmed that homosexuality is a sin. Pope Francis's statements have been controversial within the Catholic Church, who have tried to maintain unity within it. In February 2019, the Pope held an unprecedented international summit where he said that the Church was ready to take responsibility for abuse against children.
The Church will do whatever is necessary to bring to justice anyone who has committed such crimes.
Pope Francis also emphasized a more inclusive Catholic Church, but this earned him criticism of conservatives who accused him of diluting the Church's teachings. And a stinging criticism of the Curia, the Church's central government, meant many in the Vatican have long wanted to see him go. After an exhausting journey to Canada in July, he hinted he might follow the unusual example set by his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, and resign from the role.
This, with all honesty, is not a catastrophe. There can be a change of popes.
For his critics, Francis did not behave like a pope should. But his supporters will remember him for his simplicity, vibrant personality, and his empathy for the poor.
Pope Francis redefined the role of papacy with humility, simplicity, and the focus on inclusivity. While his approach inspires millions, it also deepens rifts within the Catholic Church. We look back at the legacy of a transformative yet divisive pontificate.
Pope Francis changed the face of the modern papacy by shunning much of its pomp and privilege, as did his attempts to create a more inclusive and less judgmental Catholic Church. Hailing from Argentina, Francis became the first non-European pope in 1,300 years, on election in 2013. It was the first time in 6 centuries a pope was elected after his predecessor resigned. Until Benedict died nearly a decade later, unusually there were 2 men in white in the Vatican. Francis inherited a deeply divided church, and that progressive conservative gap became a chasm. Another defining challenge, sex abuse crimes by the clergy, and how to restore credibility to a damaged Catholic Church. And at his clampdowns on using the traditional Latin Mass. He allowed women and Muslims to take part in a Holy Thursday ritual, until then restricted to Catholic men. Capital punishment was deemed inadmissible, and he attacked the arms industry and called for the abolition of nuclear weapons. A towering conservative, the late Australian Cardinal George Pell, called his papacy a catastrophe in a memo meant to be anonymous. But Francis could disappoint the liberals too. He refused to allow some married men to be ordained in remote areas, such as the Amazon. More women took senior Vatican roles, but not as many as progressives wanted. Most of the sexual abuse crimes that shook the church took place before Francis's election, but he had to fix the damage. 2018 was a bad year. Francis had to apologise for grave mistakes after he defended a Chilean bishop accused of sex crimes against minors. He later sent an investigator. And US Cardinal Theodore McGarrick became the first cardinal defrocked for sex abuse. In 2019, Francis summoned church leaders to a summit and issued a landmark decree, making bishops accountable for sexual abuse or for covering it up, and abolishing pontifical secrecy for abuse cases. For victims groups, though, it was all too little, too late. Pope Francis renounced luxurious apartments at the Vatican for a modest hotel he never moved out of, setting an example for cardinals he said lived like princes. He sent the bulletproof Pope-mobile off to a museum and was driven round in a car with few security features. Followers touched by tragedy or problems might pick up the phone to hear, "This is Francis." He was dubbed the Cold Call Pope.
Church bells toll solemnly across Rome as news of Pope Francis's passing spread, with tributes pouring in from the world leaders honouring the late pontiff's enduring legacy of compassion, justice and unwavering service to the most vulnerable.
Tributes are pouring from around the world following the death of Pope Francis at the age of 88. A beloved figurehead to more than 1 billion Catholics. His passing has touched leaders, clergy and citizens alike, many of whom have taken for social media to express their sorrow and admiration for the late pontiff. From India, US Vice President J.D. Vance, who met Pope Francis just a day before his death, expressed heartbreak, recalling one of the Pope's early homilies during COVID as beautiful and timeless. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen remembered Francis as a global moral beacon, his humility and compassion reaching far beyond this Catholic Church. Similar sentiments echoed through posts by leaders like Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof, who called him a man of the people, and the French President Emmanuel Macron, who praised his vision of unity and hope. Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin issued a heartfelt statement recounting Francis's commitment to justice and his landmark 2018 visit to Ireland, while Archbishop of York Stephen Cottrell described him as a holy man of God who lived his faith with quiet strength and service. Leaders from Lithuania, Poland and Israel hailed Francis as a unifying voice for peace and interfaith dialogue. Israel's President Isaac Herzog recalled the Pope's boundless compassion and his efforts to foster Jewish-Christian relations, while the Lithuanian President called him a father to all of humanity. In a more somber note, Iranian officials offered condolences to the global Christian community, noting strong diplomatic ties with the Vatican throughout Francis's papacy. From the Vatican to villages worldwide, Pope Francis's death has sparked a moment of collective mourning, reflection and reverence. Across political lines, languages and faiths, one truth rings clear. His legacy of humility, inclusion and justice left an undeniable mark on the world.
Heading over to India now, US Vice President J.D. Vance arrives in India, meeting Prime Minister Modi under the shadow of the US tariff threats. Talks aim to boost defense ties, avoid tariff hikes and prepare for a trade deal before Trump's expected visit this year.
US Vice President J.D. Vance has touched down in New Delhi for a high-stakes 4-day visit aimed at solidifying a bilateral trade agreement with India, as tensions escalate amid a deepening US-China trade war. Accompanied by Second Lady Usha Vance, their 3 children, the Vance family was warmly received by Indian Railways Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw, with a ceremonial welcome underscoring the diplomatic weight of the trip. The White House says the visit is focused on shared economic and geopolitical priorities, while Indian officials hope it will fast-track an agreement amid the US sweeping global tariff push. Washington recently slapped a 26% tariff on Indian exports, a move met with concern in New Delhi despite strong personal ties between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Trump. A temporary 90-day tariff pause offers a narrow window for negotiation. Talks are expected to cover tariff reductions, tech cooperation, and pathways to scale two-way trade to $500 billion. But challenges loom notably from the All India Kisan Sabha, the country's largest farmers' union, which has announced nationwide protests against the deal, warning that liberalization could devastate India's agricultural sector, especially dairy. Meanwhile, US visa revocations disproportionately affecting Indian students and H-1B workers have added another layer of tension, prompting calls from Indian opposition leaders to raise the issue during the talks. Despite the diplomatic pressure, the Vance visit also includes personal touches, with the Vice President and his family set to tour key cultural sites. Still, behind the photo ops lie tough negotiations as both nations seek to strike a delicate balance between economic ambition and domestic sensitivities.
Malaysia's airlines may acquire Boeing 737 MAX jets if Chinese carriers reject them amid US-China tensions. The airline's parent company is negotiating for vacant delivery slots, seeking to speed up fleet renewal despite supply chain and production delays.
Malaysia Airlines may be poised to benefit from escalating trade tensions between the United States and China, as its parent company, Malaysia Aviations Group, confirms discussions with Boeing to acquire new jets initially earmarked for Chinese carriers. The talks come amid reports that Boeing is redirecting 737 MAX aircraft previously set aside for Chinese airlines back to the US, a move widely seen as fallout from the ongoing tariff dispute. MAG said that the group is exploring whether it can claim those vacated delivery slots, citing the opportunity for earlier than expected fleet expansion. Airlines globally are eager to secure new planes, but delivery backlogs and production delays exacerbated by pandemic aftershocks and Boeing's regulatory and labor troubles have strained timelines across the industry. Backed by Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund, MAG is in the midst of an ambitious fleet renewal strategy that includes plans to operate 55 next-generation 737 MAX aircraft by 2030. Last month, the group announced it would purchase 30 new Boeing jets and lease 25 more through Air Lease Corp, but the current Boeing discussions are independent of that leasing agreement. Any additional aircraft acquired through vacated Chinese delivery slots would require MAG to raise fresh capital via the markets. While Boeing and Chinese officials have remained silent on diverted jet deliveries, industry observers say the development could reshape regional aviation dynamic, handing an unexpected advantage to Southeast Asian carriers amid shifting geopolitical headwinds.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. The US and Iran completed a second round of nuclear talks in Rome, agreeing to resume expert-level negotiations in Oman. Discussions focus on uranium, stockpile management and peaceful energy use, the ensuring future US commitment to any nuclear agreement.
If a nuclear deal isn't struck soon, Donald Trump has threatened Tehran with military force. What the US wants to get out of the deal is unclear, though.
I'm for stopping Iran, very simply, from having a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear weapon. I want Iran to be great and prosperous and terrific.
In 2018, Trump pulled out of a 2015 agreement that put limits on Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. Since then, Iran has resumed its nuclear activities and has advanced its program of uranium enrichment up to 60% purity, bringing it much closer to the 90% level needed to make a nuclear weapon. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, had initially said the conversation with the Iranians would concern uranium enrichment at 3.67% for civil nuclear purposes, the level agreed to in the 2015 agreement. But he U-turned just 12 hours later, saying Iran must totally eliminate its nuclear enrichment and weaponization program, something Tehran is unlikely to agree to.
What is certain is that Iran's enrichment program is a real accepted matter. We are prepared to build trust and address any potential concerns. But the core issue of enrichment itself is not negotiable.
Iran insists its nuclear program is for civilian purposes only, but the International Atomic Energy Agency is skeptical after secret nuclear facilities were discovered in 2002.
The US Supreme Court has temporarily halted the deportation of Venezuelan migrant detained in Texas under the Alien Enemies Act, responding to legal challenges concerning due processing rights.
The US Supreme Court early on Saturday paused President Donald Trump's administration from deporting Venezuelan men in immigration custody, after their lawyers said they were at imminent risk of removal without the judicial review the court had insisted on. Lawyers for the American Civil Liberties Union filed urgent requests on Friday in multiple courts, including the Supreme Court, urging immediate action. They said some of the men had already been loaded onto buses and were told they were to be deported. The latest escalation is centered on dozens of Venezuelans held at the Blue Bonnet detention facility in Anson, Texas. The ACLU said the rapid developments meant the administration was poised to deport the men, using a 1798 law historically used only in wartime. It would not have given them a realistic opportunity to contest their removal, as the Supreme Court had required. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the Supreme Court decision. Conservative Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito publicly dissented from the decision.
That criminals, fraudsters, and illegal aliens.
The case raises questions about the Trump administration's adherence to limits set by the Supreme Court. And it could herald a significant clash between the two co-equal branches of government, potentially even a full-blown constitutional crisis. Trump was elected on a promise to crack down on migrants. He has invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act in an attempt to swiftly deport accused members of the Tren de Aragua, a criminal gang originating from Venezuelan prisons, which his administration labels a terrorist group. The president and his senior aides have asserted their executive power grants them wide authority on immigration matters, testing the balance of power between branches of government. At issue is whether the Trump administration has met the Supreme Court's standard for allowing due process before sending the detainees to another country, possibly to the notorious prison in El Salvador where others are jailed. It was unclear on Friday how many people were potentially to be deported and where they might be taken.
Severe spring snowstorms have caused deadly avalanches in the French Alps, resulting in multiple fatalities and prompting rescue operations amid challenging weather conditions. Let's take a look.
Plows struggled against a snowfall, finding it difficult to keep up with the accumulation, while blocked pathways made walking difficult. These were the scenes on Thursday as more than a meter of snow fell in just a couple of hours in Savoie. In the ski resorts of Val Thorens and Tignes, local officials issued stay-at-home orders during the storm. Thousands of residents and tourists suddenly found themselves confined to their hotel lobbies or apartments. The snowstorm was so intense that the highest avalanche level, 5 out of 5, was issued for most of the ski resorts in the area. A woman caught in the storm was rescued at the entrance to the Val Thorens resort.
The road was closed and a pedestrian was caught in an avalanche coming from higher up. We aren't sure of the exact circumstances.
After the storm passed, residents were once again allowed to go outdoors, but officials asked them to stay near their homes.
Due to the extraordinary events on April 17th, residents have been confined to the village center.
Forecasters warn the risk of avalanches remains high despite better weather. Officials are urging those who do go out to be extra vigilant and stay on cleared pathways.
Despite a declared Easter ceasefire, Russia and Ukraine have exchanged accusations of violation, with reports of continued shelling and drone attacks undermining the truce.
As Ukrainians and Russians separately attended Easter services in their home countries, their governments accused each other on Sunday of carrying out hundreds of attacks, despite a one-day truce declared by Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Outside the St. Michael's Cathedral in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, some residents spoke of air raid sirens going off right after Putin announced the ceasefire. This woman described missiles and drones flying overhead afterwards, saying they caused explosions in the country's south. What kind of ceasefire is that, she said. He lied, as he always does. Putin on Saturday evening unilaterally ordered his forces to stop all military activity along the front line until the end of Sunday, Moscow time. But on Sunday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia was only pretending to observe an Easter ceasefire, saying on social media that Moscow had in fact continued hundreds of artillery attacks on Saturday night, with more assaults on Sunday. In an early afternoon post, Zelensky said, quote, "Either Putin does not have full control over his army, or the situation proves that in Russia they have no intention of making a genuine move toward ending the war and are only interested in favorable PR coverage." Russia's defense ministry in turn accused Ukraine of breaking the truce more than 1,000 times with shots fired and drone strikes. It said the attacks damaged infrastructure and caused some civilian deaths. The apparent failure to observe even an Easter ceasefire shows just how hard it will be for US President Donald Trump to achieve his aim of clinching a lasting deal to end the war that Russia began 3 years ago. The US will abandon efforts to broker a peace deal unless there are clear signs of progress soon, officials said on Friday. Meanwhile, President Zelensky tried to keep his country hopeful. Dressed in a traditional shirt, he urged Ukrainians through an Easter message not to lose faith in each other. Faith, he added, that evil may have its hour, but God will have his day.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. A joyful Easter tradition returns to Horsen, Germany, where locals and visitors compete in a vibrant egg toss challenge. Colourful hard-boiled eggs soar through the spring air in hopes of record-breaking cracking-free landing. Let's take a look.
In Germany, the 37th annual Easter egg throwing competition took place on Sunday in the western town of Horhausen. Participants were given a single brightly colored hard-boiled egg to throw as far as possible without it breaking. The longest recorded egg throw to date is 78 meters, set in 2002. Eggs that remain intact are collected and distributed to the crowd, while broken eggs become bird feed. The tradition of Easter egg throwing continues to be a part of Horhausen's Easter celebrations, dating back to the post-Second World War era.
Humanoid robots raced against humans for the first time in a half marathon in Beijing. One of the robots fell over at the starting line. Another crashed into a railing after running a short distance, causing its human operator to fall over. Let's take a look.
Humanoid robots raced against humans for the first time in a half marathon in China's Beijing on Saturday. The robots were accompanied by human trainers who sometimes had to physically support the machines during the race. One of the robots fell over at the starting line and lay flat on the ground. Another crashed into a railing after running a short distance, causing its human operator to fall over. The winning robot, Tiangong Ultra, finished in 2 hours and 40 minutes. A long way to go before it can surpass the men's winner, who finished in 1 hour and 2 minutes. The race drew crowds of spectators, including He Xishu, who works in the field of artificial intelligence.
There's a kind of sportsmanship, whether it's humans or robots. They are all exercising. It feels like I'm watching the development of machines, the development of AI.
Although humanoid robots have made appearances at marathons in China over the past year, this was the first time they were competing alongside humans. The robots from Chinese manufacturers such as Droid UP and Noetics Robotics came in different shapes and sizes. Some were shorter than 4 feet, while some were nearly 6 feet tall. Beijing officials have described the event as more akin to a race car competition, given the need for engineering and navigation teams. China is hoping that investment in frontier industries like robotics can help create new engines of economic growth. Some analysts, though, question whether having robots enter marathons is a reliable indicator of their industrial potential.
Well, that's a wrap from all of us right here on World News Tonight. I'm Akwil Qureshi, and we're leaving you with the scenes of giant kites filling the sky at China Kite Festival. Thank you for watching, by the way, and have yourselves a good night.